Silicon Valley.
Hi, Crystal.
Good afternoon.
So, can you explain to me what a Russian essay contest is and what you did to win that?
So I studied Russian language as my second language in high school. And I had studied Chinese and Cantonese since I was a child, so I wanted to try something completely different. When I was younger, I did rhythmic gymnastics, and all my coaches were from Russia. So I learned to count 1 to 10, but nothing else beyond that. That contest specifically had 2 categories, non-native speakers and native speakers. I fell into the non-native category, and I wrote a 350-word essay in 2 hours, and it got submitted, and I was a silver medalist.
So there's the G8 summits going on right now, and there are some, back to being a Russian speaker, there's some tensions between the United States and Russia right now with arms to Syria and that sort of thing. What are your thoughts on the U.S. relations with Russia and about Russia in general?
Well, I think it's a very touchy issue. A lot of diplomacy needs to come out at just the right time. It's a very sensitive subject. Since the Cold War, we have a long history of having to be very delicate around the situation. I think particularly regarding Syria, as you mentioned, I am bringing a perspective of a patriotic voter. I definitely support everything the Obama administration has done to support the rebels because I personally hope they can become a democracy, even if Putin's administration doesn't believe so.
So I noticed that you studied psychology at Stanford, and tell me a little bit about the type of psychology that you study, and do you have a favorite psychologist?
So social psychologist, Philip Zimbardo is my favorite.
Okay, I wonder
The
why.
Stanford Prison Experiment was done right next door to the lecture hall that I attended on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Okay.
So it was fascinating. I love social
So
psychology.
what's a big takeaway as a social psychologist? When people say, what does that mean? What does social psychology mean? What would you say?
Well, I'd say social psychology is the way we interact with people and how people react to interactions on a day-to-day basis. Philip Zimbardo is very famous for his prison experiment, and even though that has to do with authority, and not everybody is in a position of authority, everyone has grown up with a parent, so they experience social psychology with their interactions growing up in the family.
So how does social psychology impact you, knowing that as you grow to be a leader as Miss California? How will you use social psychology?
Well, social psychology is just having compassion, having empathy, knowing that sometimes, as Miss California, you're under a lot of stress. You're going to be in situations with a lot of pressure, and people will believe in you and therefore inadvertently put pressure on you. I think in that particular situation, social psychology is great because I get to protect myself, and I know that everyone is there to help me regardless of how that manifests.
Some of the people that were involved in that prison study that you mentioned now kind of look back, and I've heard some of them interviewed, and kind of see it as kind of a traumatic experience for them. What is it that you think the balance is between learning about human psychology, but then also not turning this all into guinea pigs and having long-lasting effects on our psyches?
So that was a big breakthrough study because that's when the IRB was formed, the Internal Review Board, and that basically puts the line down and says, no, you can't hurt people regardless of what the academic pursuits are. So in that particular situation, since that study, we've been very careful not to cross that line to harm anyone.
Why do you want to lead a technology company?
Excuse me, how will I?
Why do you want to lead a technology company?
So technology really fires me up. I have been raised in San Francisco my whole life, and having gone to Stanford, I've definitely caught that entrepreneurial spirit. The whole concept of being able to create something that's your very own and to totally dedicate yourself wholeheartedly to it. Man, that's just fire under my butt.
So here's an entrepreneur that you admire from the Silicon Valley.
Mark Zuckerberg, with Facebook.
Why do you
designer.
admire him?
Why do I admire him? I think I admire him particularly because he had the guts to attempt something that no one had ever done before, no matter how old he was. There are a lot of, there's pressure when you're 21 years old to graduate. And he said, no, I'm not going to follow society's definition of success. I'm going to go shoot for the moon, land among the stars, fail if need be, and continue on with that.
So there's a lot of work going on in Silicon Valley now in cloud technology. What's the cloud?
So the cloud is basically server technology that ends up as a digital insurance. So say, for instance, all of you take photos with your Android or your Apple iPhones or just your regular digital cameras. The cloud technology enables you to take a double copy of it, place it somewhere, not have to worry about it being on your hard drive, and retrieve it at a later time. So that's really neat because I think that's the future of all information storage.
What if any concerns do you have with the NSA snooping into your cell phone records and your emails?
So I'm actually okay with that, especially since I know I'm not a terrorist. I do think that the
Do you
United
believe
States...
it's truly restricted to terrorists?
So I don't think it's truly restricted to terrorists, but if it's an issue with Homeland Security, I'm willing to relinquish everything to the government as long as they don't overstep their bounds and go back to what the fascist regime would do.
Is
which
that
to
what the
use
government's
it
telling us
against-
because they got caught?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, is that what the government is telling us because they got caught? Oh, it's a security issue.
Yeah, I think being caught is one issue. They're definitely at a place where they might have to come up with excuses. But on the other hand, there's a lot of information that is kept classified specifically because it's potent because we don't know it.
Right.
And since that has been unearthed and Snowden has totally just been a muckraker in that sense, it's just a really big problem that all of us are, we talk about a lot.
How will you help the issue of gender imbalance?
Well, I think being a role model is definitely key. We have very educated women in the room. We have, a doctor, we have a former Miss Montana, we have a dance educator. These are all leaders, and I think it really comes by exemplary work, just by showing that you care about something and working on an interactive basis to really inspire those children. And that's what I've done with my platform. I've been able to work with the Girl Scouts of Northern California. I've done little engineering activities with them. Marshmallows and toothpicks, get to work, 30 seconds, put together a structure. And they learn creativity, they learn how to collaborate, and most importantly, they learn how to fail, but also achieve success after that failure. This is my third time at Miss California. So if I could go back and tell them, look, I became Miss California on my third try. The first time I didn't do it, the second time I didn't do it either, I was first runner-up. But look, failure and failure and failure is helpful because you actually learn what you need to achieve success later on.
Let's
What
talk
have you
about
learned
veterans.
differently?
I'm sorry?
What have you learned differently this time?
So being first runner-up last year, I was able to follow Leah Cecil very closely. I knew that at a drop of a hat, anything could happen, and I would have to take her place. I have had this mental mindset for the past year that has prepared me for the job of Miss California. I'm so prepared, and I've actually become very close to her, so she's a close mentor. This is her pin, and I think that this is bringing me good luck, because if I make it to Miss America, it'll be the first time in history that there will be 2 Crystal Lees, because Miss Hawaii is also Crystal Lee.
I have a question for you getting back to Stanford.
Yes.
I'm a Stanford alum myself, and I was there not long after the prison experiment, so I can really relate. I made money volunteering for a psychology experiments. As we look at the endowment coming out of Stanford, there's a lot of criticism as to perhaps the reason the endowment is not as large as it could be is because of the changing demographics of the student body.
Yes.
Do you feel that the admission requirements are fair at Ivy League and Ivy League of the West University specifically?
I think that it is fair. It's becoming more fair, even if it means the endowment is shrinking. I know that seems a little bit unsustainable, but it's come to a point where there's a lot of money and there's a lot of resources and opportunity. We want to give students from all backgrounds the opportunity at a good education.
Let's talk about veterans. So you'll be representing a state that's very patriotic, a lot of military bases here. We have a lot of veterans coming back from the drawdown. What issues do you think that they'll be facing? How can California help them, and where do you stand on that as Miss California?
Well, as Miss California, I definitely support all veterans initiatives. I think that without them, we wouldn't even have the liberty and the fundamental things that we take for granted as citizens. I personally never served, but I have the utmost admiration for those who do, and I hope that as they age, that they will have those resources at their disposal. I live next to a VA hospital in San Francisco.
I just have to ask, do you think women should engage in combat?
Last year that was my onstage question, and I said no on stage, but I've changed my mind. I think that women should be able, if they want to and if they are prepared to engage in combat, especially if they're in all-female troops.
Go back to entrepreneurship. Is government regulation stifling business in the United States?
Is the government
Regulation stifling business in the United States?
I'm not a big fan of big government, so I would have to say yes. I think that ultimately I'm a big fan of Adam Smith's theory, which is that you just let it be and the economy will all, it'll reach a level of homeostasis. So it'll just.
Let's talk about Governor Brown, speaking of homeostasis.
Sorry about that. We're getting arm back here. Time is expired. You have 30 seconds remaining to tell us whatever you like.
Yes, so as a former Miss California's outstanding teen, I've been able to experience what it's like to be a leader. And if I was to be Miss California, I would set into motion a roadmap of basically goals throughout the year. I would like to ultimately bring in more contestants, to strengthen the partnerships with corporate sponsors, being able to speak Mandarin and Cantonese. I would love to go to China and really promote pistachios for those sponsors.
All right, thank you, well, your time is expired.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Have a good day, bye-bye.